Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Martin, and as Ole so nicely introduced, I'm from the Danish National Institute of Public Health. 3 years ago, I did my thesis at the institute, and I did it on a little thing I hadn't really heard of before called cycling without age. I went out to make a qualitative study on what happens among the passengers in cycling without age when they go on these rides. How does it influence them, and what do they actually experience? And the way I did it was I went along on rides, I spoke to the passengers, and after finishing my thesis, and we'll get into the results later, don't worry, I was employed there and could actually be part of the bigger project, which was called When Movement Moves, or in Danish, Når bevægelse bevæger. And the story behind the name is that we could hear anecdotally that people were moved a lot by trishaw rides. It influenced people emotionally, and because of this, we wanted to figure out, well, what's going on? What's in that black box called the trishaw ride? What happens when you take nursing home residents outside and into the community? So we set forth to do that. And we wanted to look particularly at quality of life, or what does it mean physiologically, mentally, and socially for people who cannot move on their own, or at least are restricted in either physically moving or at least leaving the place they're in, to be moved by others. And we chose the physiological, mental, and social dimensions because these three constitute what a good life is. If you're mentally healthy, if you're physiologically healthy, and you're socially healthy, you're likely to think your life is pretty good. So, I actually find it a bit backwards having me stand here and tell you about how good cycling without age is, because you're the ones who are feeling it on your own bodies, you're the ones who live it and do it. And because of that, I'm going to be a bit backwards and start with what is the result of all the things we've done, and then afterwards I can tell you what we did. So, our key findings is that going on trishaw rides significantly increases how nursing home residents view their own quality of life. We looked at it over 16 to 20 weeks, and from the first time we spoke to them till speaking to them the last time, they reported significantly an increase in their quality of life. We also find that going on trishaw rides provided new experiences, and it allowed the passengers to reminisce, to remember the old days, and to share it with their pilot or with other passengers. And this created a strong bond, both between passengers and other passengers, and between the passengers and pilots. And it even extended in the nursing home, and the story spread like wildfire. And finally, and I'm going to keep this one a bit secret, but pilots have the power to ... and that's actually because pilots have the power to do so much, and we'll get into that a bit more later. So, I'll go through the following things. How did we actually do this study? Which methods did we use, and why and how did we choose these things? And then I'll go through quality of life as one measurement outcome. I'll go through physiology and functionality, and finally, volunteering and how pilots feel about the whole thing. So, first of all, we went out and chose an array of different methodologies to research this. We did qualitative interviews, we did observations, we did surveys, and we did functional tests with residents. I'm going to go down here for a second, because and then we did a quasi-experimental design, and that sounds tough. Basically, it's what I said earlier. We measured at the beginning, and we measured again 16 to 20 weeks later. In the in-between period, residents had to go on 6 to 8 trishaw rides, simply put. Okay, we had 8 nursing homes and participants from those 8 homes as part of the study. 4 were located in Jutland and 4 here in Zealand. We had a total of 52 passengers who participated in the surveys and functional tests, and then we did a survey with 122 pilots. And it's the yellow dots, if you're curious here. All right. So we wanted to measure quality of life. How do you do that? Well, it had to be self-reported. We wanted to know, how do you as passengers, as residents, feel about your life situation? We can't really tell you how you feel about it, but you can tell us. So we asked residents to imagine a ladder containing 10 rungs. The bottom one, with the red smiley here, was the worst possible life imaginable, whereas 10 was the best possible life imaginable. We then asked them to score, how is your life? How do you feel about your life? Is it good? Is it bad? Where do you rank it? We did this before, and we did this after. We also did functional tests, which consisted of a hand grip strength, which is a biomarker for mortality. So the stronger your hand grip is in old age, the less likely you are to die soon. Sorry. We also tested the balance and the walking distance and walking speed of the residents. We did a cognitive screening where they had to answer a variety of questions regarding their ability to recall birthdays, days, did they know what day of the week it was, what year we were in, what season it was. And finally, we did interviews and observations. All in all, we spent about an hour on the survey and the functional tests, and then the interviews was likely an hour each, but we only interviewed around 10 individuals. So, getting into the results. This is how quality of life looked. At baseline, the residents scored 7 in quality of life. Said, my life is a 7. That's how satisfied I am with it, out of a scale of 10, where 10 is the greatest life imaginable. After the trishaw rides, after these 16 to 20 weeks, we observed an increase. I need to see it myself. As you can see, it reaches nearly 8. And just for some context, the average quality of life among the general population here in Denmark is 7.6. So you went from nursing home residents who rated their quality of life lower than the average population in Denmark to a population higher. And this was a statistically significant increase. We also did something else, which I haven't actually spoken about yet. But we asked our dear pilots out at the nursing homes to have the passengers score their mood before the ride and after the ride. And it was done very simply. We had a laminated paper containing these 5 smileys. How is your mood now? Is it very bad, or is it very good, or is it somewhere in between? And then we had them repeat that same measure after the ride had concluded. And prior to the rides, they scored an average. Can this point? Do you see a laser pointer somewhere? No. Okay. So 3.73 is what they reported prior to going. So that would be somewhere between the neutral yellow smiley to the green happy smiley, a bit closer to the green happy. Following the rides, however, we'd moved all the way across the happy smiley and we're on to the very, very happy smiley. So what we can take from that is going on trishaw rides gave a significant boost in mood immediately. And what we heard when we spoke to staff and when we spoke to pilots was this effect was lasting. It didn't just wear off immediately. You had people come home from rides and be happy for the rest of the day, and people who were otherwise outwardly reacting or trying to escape, so to speak, were suddenly calmed down and actually just seemed to enjoy being in the place. Okay, so what did people actually say when we spoke to them? Well, I'm going to go down here again because I need to see the quote and I can't see it from there. So one of the passengers we spoke to told us, this is actually something I observed, but there'll be some speak in here. But we were driving on our way home from, sorry, I've completely screwed this quote up. So, no, this is a passenger explaining a previous ride. So she says, on our way back from a visit to her daughter's home, from her childhood home, I thought maybe we could visit our daughter and see if she's at home. And she was, both her and her husband. And I thought that was fantastic. It was exactly what I had hoped for. We even got our picture taken, which was brought in the paper the next day. This was an experience she had had on one of her first rides, and it had really cemented the experience for her. This is nice. I can go visit my daughter. She doesn't have to come to me. That gives me something. That gives me something good in my life. And here I was talking to an old fellow named Harry, who said, to be seen was amazing. People are so nice. They say hi and they wave, and they can easily see we're a bunch of old farts on a field trip. And I thought that was, such a brilliant look on it. Now, we did some functional tests, as I said. We checked their cognition. We looked for physical functioning. We looked at hand grip strength. I'm sorry, this is in Danish. Have to live with that. We checked how far can they walk in 6 minutes, and does it increase? Generally, there were no statistically significant changes. So physiologically, it doesn't look like participating in cycling without age does anything for the residents. However, it does give some bodily experiences, and these have a lot of value as well. And now we are where I was observing. So I was driving along on my bike, frantically trying to write notes on my phone as I saw things. And then the pilot, who was driving with a lady called Anne, hit a bump in the road and slowed down. Of course, he asked, "Hey, does it hurt when we hit the bumps? And are you okay?" And the passenger replied, "Yeah, but that's all right. It should hurt a little." And that had me clutch the brakes, like, what? Why does it have to hurt? I simply had to ask her. And then she said, "Yeah, but then I can feel I'm alive." And then another episode. And this is from an occupational therapist I spoke to, who told me about a ride where she realized that passengers are actually, or residents, are actually capable of a lot more than you think. And she told me, well, I've been a pilot myself, and I've been a couple of rides where we went far away, down to the gardens, for instance, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, one of the passengers I had along had to pee. And I just thought, shit, we are far from home, and what do we even do? And then the passenger just says, "Don't you worry, I'll handle it. I can sit behind that tree over there." And she did it. And the occupational therapist here thought, can she actually do that? And sometimes you just get incredibly surprised at how capable they are. When situations outside the norm present themselves, I mean, wow, she easily managed the deep squat. So that's the last time I've picked up pins from the floor from her. Yeah, that was such a great, yeah. All right. And I can see that I am not going to be using all the time, so we'll have lots of time to converse afterwards. So the final thing was volunteering. What does it mean to be a volunteer in Cycling Without Age? And what's the most important thing about being a volunteer, about being a pilot? And a lot of pilots said, well, 69% of pilots said it's making a difference. It's making a difference for somebody else. It's speaking to other passengers and pilots. It's actually building a community of my own. I get to go out, I get to be social, I get to meet new people. And then there were a few who thought, well, there's some exercise, there's spending time with others, there's having fun, that's also important, it's also very good things. We did the same thing for the pilots as we had done with residents. We asked them to score their mood prior to and after the rides, and we asked them to evaluate their trips on the same scale we used for quality of life. Generally, pilots scored the rides at a 9 out of 10. It was fun going, it was nice, it was so good. And for the mood, generally pilots looked to be in a good mood when they arrived, scored almost 4 getting there, but it was higher afterwards, basically all the time. The only few times that we had recorded the mood being lower afterwards was when something bad had happened, like the bike tipping and going on the side with the passenger in it. That gave a 2, not a 1 or a 0, but a 2. So a bit down, but but still good. And then we spoke to a couple of pilots, and basically they said, well, we get fresh air, and that's really nice. We get good and interesting stories from the people we drive with. We learn something about our own community, and we actually get to live a bit through them and take their stories forward and present them in other forums, and it gives a boost to the mood. Some even spoke about actually making new friends among the passengers. And generally, pilots thought that their effort was rewarded tenfold. So going into the nursing home, taking passengers out on a ride, spending your own time on it was way more rewarding than the time you had to give up. Like it made sense to do. Yeah, and then one of the pilots we spoke to said, and I think that really emphasizes that it was true friendships, but he said, well, sometimes it's a bit sad having made these friendships with people in old age because they pass away. And that really hurts when you lose a friend. Yeah. So, back to the key findings. We found a significant increase in quality of life. We found that going on the rides gave new experiences and all memories, and they gave meaningfulness to life and improved the quality of life. We suspect this is what gave the improvement to quality of life. And pilots have the power to make a significant difference. And that was actually a very short presentation on a study that's been going on for a couple of years. We have this report out. I have a couple of exemplars. It's in Danish. We also have a small version, and it has some of the results you've seen today on the slides. It's very nice to just have a peek in. And hopefully over the next couple of months, we'll have at least 2 scientific papers published in peer-reviewed journals as well. But those of you in academia here know that it's a process. I'll briefly just talk about one of them, which is a qualitative study on loneliness, where we find that particularly existential loneliness is one of the things that nursing home residents experience a lot. We also find that going on these rides, building a community, actually helps alleviate it. But that's a study to come, or a paper to come. Okay.
Thank you so much, Martin. That it blows me away every single time when I hear you talk about it. I love these anecdotes as well that you have.
Yeah.
And I think that also completely strengthens your, your professional integrity as well. That, you're not just sitting there looking at numbers, but you're actually out there talking to the people, right? And I like the fact that you made that comparison as well with, the general population as well. So that the increase in your self-evaluation of your quality of life has gone up from about 7 to nearly 8, which is higher than the population. And I was a little cheeky recently as well, and I went even further. And now we have 2 people from Finland down here, right? The Finns are, of course, the happiest people on the planet, But you know what? They're not as happy as the passengers in cycling without age, because they score nearly 8 and the Finns score 7.7, right? Okay, so it's soon going to be lunch, but there is a good time for some questions. I'm pretty sure that there'll be people. So John has the first question down there.
Apologize, a comment first and then a question, is we found that rather than calling our people we ride with passengers, which puts you in a different place than, we call them our riding partners. If I take you for a ride versus I ride with you is a subtle but significant difference in the way we relate with people. We've already taken their car keys away and everything else, but to say I'm riding with you versus I'm taking you. So I'd love us to switch from passengers to riding partners. I think we all understand that, but that subtle language to older people, I think, makes a difference. But a question for you, a lot of us probably ride with people who don't have language anymore. You know, we kind of leave old people off the chart, but if you don't have language, we leave you way off the chart. How do we measure those kind of, like when she was talking about brain things that we can do? Is there a way to measure those people? We can, as pilots, we understand joy from someone who has no spoken language, but how, if someone needs a measurement, how, and I don't know the answer to that, but I sure would like to be able to, if people want the data, to say, oh, well, she just grunted and she hasn't made a sound in 10 years, you know? And we've experienced that, and I think those people deserve, do we deserve data? But I think they deserve data too. How can we measure that?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I'm just going to bring up this the smiley scale again, because even if you don't have language, this is a very simple visual cue you could use, like present a scale, make it larger if you want to use the scale of 0 to 10 to correlate to the quality of life scale we used. But have something visual and have them point, perhaps, would do it. Of course, that would need some validation to ensure it was proper data, and obviously that's a limitation of our study. We've included people with language. That was part of the inclusion criteria, unfortunately. But I definitely think it's worthwhile doing, and even if you don't do it systematically, or at least using a validated tool, you could still use it on a day-to-day basis. Just see, okay, how should we move before we go? How should we move after we come home? By pointing, can you signify if it's improved? I think that would be a way to go about it, at least locally. Yeah?
Maybe I have to just comment as well, John, because I totally agree with you as well in terms of the way that we talk about the relationships that we have with our passengers, because I think we are talking about these equal relationships, and Susan talked about both the equal nature of the relationship and the synchronicity, and I think in many ways as well, I would consider both pilots and passengers to be volunteers. I mean, they're all volunteering their time to be together at an equal level, which I think is great.
Yeah, I completely agree that what point would there be for a pilot to go with an empty bike?
And actually, you probably all experience it as well. I've certainly experienced it many times where you take someone out and you're told that they have lost their language, they have no more language, and then still they will start to talk. And I can recommend a small film, 6-minute film, that was actually filmed in Dragør. Say that with me again, Dragør. Where we're going tomorrow with a family of 3, a son in his 50s, a mother who's still living at home, and a father who was suffering from dementia. And what they found was that when they were out there, and they interviewed them, said, when we're out there with our father who has lost his language, suddenly the language comes to him from the ways that all the influences of people around him, the sights and the sounds and so on. So I think, maybe it's difficult to gauge, but we know it's there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess it's going to be a bit anecdotally, but during one of my visits to a nursing home where I spoke to the staff there, they told me, Anne, and that was the one who spoke about it having to hurt a bit when going on a ride, because then she felt alive. After going on her first ride, the staff told me, she'd gone home into her apartment, and she'd found a big box of creative stuff, like paints and brushes, and she started painting, and none of the staff had known that she painted, or that she liked that stuff at all. But she told me when I spoke to her later that, yeah, she'd just been inspired after going out and suddenly wanted to paint again. So I guess same as finding your language, art is another language.
Exactly, yeah. We have Luc, and you control it. Sorry, Bodil.
This and somewhere. Yes. Okay. Yes.
Did you have some experience with music for our passengers? Because even especially the people who haven't language, they and have a mental disorder, they often drive better when they have music on or try shows. Did you realize this?
No, we have not looked into that at all. But I know from the literature and other studies that have looked into reminiscence therapy and stuff like that, that if you combine recalling past events with music, you have a better effect. So it makes sense that that would work as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Question, is there an English resume of the study, or could it be made? And adding some anecdotes, we find that two girlfriends who were already 5 years at the same table every morning, every midday in the nursing house, they went out together, and one of them begins to tell, "Well, here I did. You never told me that, and we are 5 years." So they get a lot of other impressions, and that wakens up other, my English is not so good.
Oh, it's completely
But
fine.
also nursing people said, but people with dementia, they don't start to talk normally, but they respond in another way after a ride. They are alerter, they understand better the instructions that they were given.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually had some staff at a nursing home tell me something along those lines. She said, usually when I get in the morning, I can tell the residents about the weather, but now that they've started going on rides, they come home and they tell me how the weather is. And I was in the car this morning, so I didn't experience it. And she thought that was great, that the dynamic sort of shifted in who was going out, who was getting impressions and taking them into the home. And they brightened the home for it. Yeah. Thank you.
Just a comment, really. This study is so important, and Ole, you mentioned it previously. Having peer-reviewed research that quote-unquote proves this is, at least, we've got an outstanding grant right now that's, any government entity in the US anyway requires peer-reviewed research that, before they're going to give you money. So having this published will be really important going forward. So thank you.
You're welcome. We're looking forward to it as well.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. I also wanted to add something that we found out in a study a few years ago, that not only it brightens up the days of the passengers and the pilots, but the overall atmosphere in the senior care homes. So, and the staff was telling us like the whole mood brightens up. And I wanted to add this, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And what's your name, or what's the name of the study? Because
it's a study that we made with the institute in Germany,
yeah,
in a local chapter in Bonn, in the west of Germany. But we haven't published it in some paper, but we have like a, let's say it's a paper but of 10 pages, but it's not published in a scientific paper. Yeah.
So a report of, yeah.
Yeah, a report, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you.
Okay. I'm right here. So, any more? Yes.
When I read for the first time about cycling without age in a book, all that tells this as an anecdote. So I have a question. Do you share your results with doctors to be, for example, be prescribed as a medicine? For example, do you doctors know about this and say, okay, you need this, and they contact with cycling without age? Is it possible? I know that there's one anecdote that doctor did that, but did you share that results? And this is my question.
Thank you.
We have a doctor here, right?
We've not yet shared it directly with doctors. We need the peer review to go through first and have it published. But the aim is to get it out as broadly as possible. I know a couple of years back here in Denmark, doctors started prescribing exercise. So I think this is not out of the question. Just need to find the right doctor to start with, I guess.
Just before you ask a question, Daniela, this study is also available in PDF, and we have actually done a Google machine translation of it, so it's very rough. But I believe you are making a proper
we're
English translation.
in the process of getting this one into English as well.
Yeah. Super.
Oh, perfect, thanks. My name is Daniela from Germany, and that was my question, if we do it and get it in English as well as your presentation. Do we get it afterwards?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. And your research is very, very valuable.
Yes.
Thank you.
So just for your information as well, we are recording everything here. We do have some restrictions with Susan's talk, but there are a lot of those points that are coming out through her TED talk as well, so you can watch that. But otherwise, everything else that you'll be listening to here will be recorded, and you can access it afterwards, including the presentations as well.
Okay.
All right. Any more questions? There's one over here, Margarita.
It's for that question. We in Portugal we belong to the social prescribing program, so doctors actually prescribe cycling without age. It's really happening. So it's
That's one of the bright spots. Take note.
and it's financed, so we won a funding for that. So. Volunteering and passengers, so it's a great program and we are very proud of it, so it's important to share that it's happening, it's actually happening.
Mm.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you pass it along?
One short question, because we did also a study very similar in Barcelona. I don't know if you...
Salas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a control group or...
No,
no.
we
You
did not.
compared the data with the general population?
Yeah,
No?
and we compared them to themselves, so following baseline and follow-up. We wanted to have a control group, but we started in 2020, COVID year. So getting access to nursing homes at all was difficult, and getting access to nursing homes where we didn't even set out to improve anything was even more difficult, so we had to abandon the idea of a control group.
And just to comment on the first intervention, this is really good to have studies to prove, scientifically what we already know. So I want to make a little, how do you say that, announcement. Is that we are starting a new study. One of our volunteers got a grant, Marie Curie Grant International, blah, blah, blah. Seems very important, I don't know. And we are starting it in 2020, next year. So we won't have the results until 2 years after, because it's going to be a research of 2 years. But the thing is that it's going to focus on volunteers. So I'll keep you updated, because I guess the results of this study will help us also. I like the idea that the recipe is not only for the passenger, also for the volunteer, because we have the recipe too in Barcelona, but it's very difficult to reach, But for the volunteer it surprised me. The idea of studying the volunteer was for the volunteer. So I'll keep you posted.
Wonderful.
All right. Any more? Last, we think we have just time enough for one more question. If not, then there was one question over here. Back to Portugal.
Yes, back to Portugal. Thank you. I'll make it quick. So I guess in your sample, you explored only with institutionalized people, right?
Yeah.
And your baseline, just correct me if I'm wrong, was prior to the rights and then after the rights,
yeah,
correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we tried to get passengers who had not gone on rights before. Some had, but a majority had not gone on rights before.
Okay.
And the majority as well has had a break because of the COVID. So for a lot of them, it was like starting anew.
Yeah. So a long of time has passed. So okay, I understand. Yeah. And did you also explore like the reasons? I guess did any one of your sample that you interviewed, for example, did not go to in a ride, or that was like a criteria? Because I don't know about the other chapters, but in Portugal we have also passengers who are not particular, but like private, who live by themselves at home, and we find it very hard. We have a lot of barriers into like convincing them or inviting them to take a ride. Although we believe it's beneficial to them, in Portugal we don't have the culture of riding the bike, especially in the older generations. So it's a very, very new thing. Did you get to explore any of that in your research, although it wasn't the theme, the focus?
We did come across it during the interviews, but I think culturally we're very different, as Ola has probably alluded to, that Danes in the age of, who are doing cycling without age right now are so accustomed to biking or have been doing it all their youth. So most knew what a bike was and most wanted to go because they wanted to get that feel of air in the wind in the hair again. Sorry. We had a few who didn't actually go on any rides during the study period, and yeah, what about them actually? We included them. Some of them still improved a bit in their quality of life, and whether that was from the atmosphere in the nursing home or something else, I can't tell.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's totally different. The culture is totally different.
Yeah, very, very different cultures, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so thank you so much, Martin. Awesome. So now it's time for lunch.